Welcome to the Mostly Unstructured podcast, sponsored by Keymark. I am Clay Tootin, the CMO at Keymark.
And I'm Ed McQuiston, the CEO of Keymark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're doing this again.
Yes. Yeah.
We didn't do it so bad last time that they kicked us out of the studio.
I can't believe it.
There's still time. There's still time.
Easily.
Totally time to do that. So today we're going to be talking about MCP. You know me.
Yeah.
Down with MCP.
Down with MCP. You know me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And IoT and IDP and
Wow.
the rest of them.
Wow. You've been working on
I've been working on this a little bit. Yeah.
That's great. I like it.
Yeah. You're the DJ. That's the problem.
Well, I pretend to be.
I'm sure this will get cut out of
Yeah.
the
God, I hope so.
So we're going to talk about MCP.
Yes.
Which is the mostly coherent podcast. Right. Is that what no, mostly unstructured podcast.
Right.
Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, MCP is a game changer, right? So
yeah.
I'm going to play the layman in this situation. You can be the smart guy, and I'll.
This will be interesting.
You did that well.
Wow,
so I'm gonna play the role I know how to play, which is kind of low key, boring, dumb.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So, but MCP is Model Context Protocol.
Correct.
Right. Which is about as helpful as HTTP.
Right. Right. It's very.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Very.
But yeah. It doesn't really say a lot about it, but about itself. But really, just kind of at a level set for everybody listening, if you're not familiar with MCP, it's a communication for AI in its simple form. It's basically a glorified API in a way, right? And
similar.
If you go look up definitions on what it is, you'll probably get something around the lines of it's like a USB cord, right?
Yeah.
It's a connector. I was talking to somebody here the other day, and I like to think of it as a Bluetooth, like Bluetooth.
Yeah.
That's not a bad example either, right? It's a way for AI to talk to all the other systems that it needs to communicate with. Really was brought about just not too long ago by Anthropic, who most people are familiar with Claude, the platform that they created, the LLM. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's able to help AI communicate. You wrote an article. It's on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Is MCP a big deal? Yeah. I think that's how.
Yeah.
That's how it's titled. Let's talk through some of that.
Sure.
What's the big deal about it, really?
Well, first of all, I like your Bluetooth analogy because at the end of the day, your iPhone, if you're an iPhone user, or your Galaxy or what have you, shouldn't have to know that your headphone is a Bose headphone versus an Apple headphone versus a Sennheiser headphone or anything else. It should just be able to use a common protocol and connect to your headphone, regardless of who made it. And in a way, that's a great way to think about MCP. What's so interesting about it, to your point about the timeline, is it's hard to describe in words how rapidly all the technology is evolving around the AI conversation. And I think that it's become so ubiquitous in certainly technology news, but really in the public setting, that there's already, I think, a bit of people being tired of hearing about AI. Yet the speed at which it's evolving it really is difficult to describe. So, as we had a company meeting back in July, and one of the things I talked about was, some of what we talked about on the last podcast, which is this idea of, really harnessing this gold that is the content at rest in, a content, repository, for our customers, that being OnBase, but, it could be a SharePoint repository, could be Box or OpenText or anyone else.
Yeah.
In those is all this sort of gold in terms of data that has previously been unavailable, right? When we think about the idea of, well, how, if I could lift that data out, one, how might I do that? Two, how might I connect it to data from my other core systems? And prior to really the last couple of months. When we spoke in July, I talked about the idea of, various, connective application types that might allow you to do that. And seemed to me at the time that ultimately, because AI is, it lives on data, right? Data is its fuel.
Mhm.
It seemed as though, well, the data lakes are going to become sort of the one ring that rules them all, and then that would make sense. Then I'm going to build my agents on, probably within those data lake applications. It would sort of make sense. Those would become sort of the platforms. When I read about MCP, it changed everything about how I thought about connecting data from, multiple sources. What MCP does, in its roots is much like our Bluetooth example. If I want to query my Salesforce, for data, prior to this, I likely would have to know N number of Salesforce APIs to be able to go get sales data versus marketing data versus service data, depending on how I'm using it,
And custom
and
integrate those, like if
custom integrate those. So I have to know the individual APIs. I've got to, create custom, calls. And look, it's a lot easier than it used to be. REST APIs are much easier than it used to be. But that's one application.
yeah,
What if I also have Workday?
right.
What if I also have and on and on and
Whatever,
on. So
whatever.
now I'm just, my life becomes building connectors to support, some end goal. What MCP does is it really takes the uniqueness of having to write to this API and this API and this API by creating a standard protocol.
Right.
So assuming that a vendor has an MCP layer, which vendors are sort of racing to do
Right.
because they want to have a seat at the table in the AI game. Now, all of a sudden, for me to reach my end goal, I don't have to know every API under the sun. I can make these calls to these various, Highland, they created an MCP layer for Ambase, for example. So if I want to query into Ambase, I don't have to know every API of it to go do that. So that really changed. I mean, to me, it's a seismic event in this AI evolution because one of the openness, right? It's a
Yeah.
very open approach. The second is that now, where I was thinking that the data lake becomes the stack, right? It becomes your agent builder, it becomes your analytics, it becomes your automation, it becomes because that's where everything is. I think that changes a little bit. And I
Yeah.
think you start to look at the idea of those can be independent agnostic tools
Right.
that query your core platforms, and you can build your agents there, you can build automation, you build analytics there, and you can do it much, much more easily because MCP exists.
And MCP is kind of like the hub on the wheel. It's just what the spokes go into all your different. What's interesting is recently I was, as you know, was participating in an AI collaborative,
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
and when MCP came up, the panelists just all lit up. It was really interesting just to see the energy behind it because up to this point, and we say that like up to this point, what 2 years we've
Right.
really
Right.
really being into this thing trying
Yeah.
to make these connections, but it is such a game changer, and a lot, and we've seen a lot of the other language models, other developers outside of Anthropic really jumping in
Yeah.
on this, which is a sign of the of how important it is. If you're gonna have you're gonna add an MCP, right? Are those done individually? Because you kinda mentioned that Highland creates
Sure.
that MCP for OnBase or whatever. Uh, would Salesforce create their own? Is there like a universal one? How should people think about that? Because
I
that
think
could be
that
a little
the
bit confusing.
the vendors, I think, are creating their own
Yeah.
layers,
Mhm.
and it's because that vendor understands its back-end
Right.
API.
And what
So
they wanna allow to kinda like a REST API, like you're
right.
setting what it can and cannot connect with, right?
Yeah,
From a
and,
security
as you and the, poor employees of Keymark know, I'm, the king of terrible analogies, and, it would be, if let's think about I'll use Salesforce as an example, right? So, um, Salesforce has many different clouds that they used to refer to them as, right? So there's their sales cloud, service cloud, and marketing cloud, and they've evolved, how they talk about that. But if you sort of think in your mind, there's, all these destination points, each one's got a door in front of it. Each door had its own key, right? What MCP is doing is saying, you don't need to have all these keys.
Mm.
I'll open the doors for you,
Mhm.
right? You just call me and tell me what you want, and I'll go open the appropriate door and get the information. And that's why really the vendor has to create it, because they understand what those keys are.
Right.
But once they've created it, they've made it, just so much easier for the outside world to consume.
So it's really easy to say, "Hey, this is all rainbows and unicorns."
Yeah.
There's some guy in IT going, "Not over my dead body."
Yeah.
You're gonna connect in
Right.
with this MCP
Right.
layer and have whatever willy-nilly access you want.
Sure.
That's an and that's what we have IT people, right?
Yep.
To
Of course.
think through and um, leaders who are thinking through security, and especially in, I mean, it's important to everybody, but certain, I think in healthcare, and all of the pieces of that's so secure, the information,
Yeah.
you don't want anybody just being able to get in there.
No, that's right.
So having this open line to connect to anything kind of fraught with some risk as well. How's that being addressed?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, particularly the larger the organization, the more sprawl you have. We hear the term shadow IT,
Hmm.
quite a bit. Or, I've got an application that is in my department that I manage, and I'm like, they come in and show me this new AI capability, and all you got to do is connect to MCP over here. Well, want to be all great, rainbows.
But if somebody's freaking out because
Right.
what do you know?
Yeah, without a question. We at Keymark work in particularly highly regulated industries, right? I mean, most of our customers they're in government, their insurance, their finance, their healthcare. And, these are organizations where the security of their data is paramount to, everything they promise their customers or patients or what have you. And so you can't just have this sort of open pipe, so to speak, that says, oh yeah, query whatever you want. So, to your point, there has to be sort of this governance component in IT, as to, and this is a more dramatic term than I intend, but sort of policing, the use of that so that we're not just able to share. Because, in any one of the scenarios I outlined, the verticals, you've got personally identifiable information. You potentially have banking information. You potentially have, patient health information. And the security of that is, those organizations depend on. And so, there's got to be sort of a rule set in place, access points, those kinds of things. There's got to be, a real diligence, from an IT perspective, that this is not just this open pipe, to go get data. So,
And I feel like it'd be remiss if we didn't at least talk about that. Being ISO certified ourselves,
yeah,
we understand the importance of security. There's certainly people who would say, "Man, you're just like you use a Bluetooth analogy. Is you just connect up to it, but you don't need it, But it's not."
yeah, let's probably not, that's probably, oh, in retrospect, maybe, no, scares people. No, I mean, I think, it's like, I grew up, as in the sales world. You grew up in the marketing world. I mean, we're not always the best at highlighting, the risks sort of side of the equation, but it is, and it should be a concern. I mean, it really has to be something that, is well thought through in terms of who has access, what can they access, what are those, rules and restrictions and all those things. I mean, we work in a world in content where, we pride ourselves on the governance of what people are storing. Yeah. What we're storing, what we've called, documents or content for years, is really just another form of data. And so who can access it now and all those things, you've got to be very,
So is that built into the actual MCP itself? Like, is that so? Back to our reference to Salesforce wallet, right? If they have they have the MCP there, like available, right? They are they the ones that are setting that? Like, where?
well, the customer's going to set it.
Okay, yeah.
The customer's going to own that.
So it's not super complicated in concept.
Correct.
Like,
No,
I don't want to beat a dead horse or just keep going talking in circles about the same thing. But what else are we? I mean, what else do people need to know about it? Other, I mean, because in a simple form, We've discussed that, I think,
Sure.
well.
Well, I think, there's some of the things that we've talked about before is that I think our opinion, certainly as an organization, is the idea of I'm just going to go big bang AI, kind of a joke about, I got to get me some of that AI.
Yeah.
Um, I, that's that is not likely to lead to a lot of success.
Mhm.
And, picking sort of the right starting point with a very specific outcome in mind, that kind of what does good look like? So if this is the end goal I want, I need to understand, first of all, what data do I need to reach that end goal? What am I going to have to feed into AI to allow me to reach that end goal? The understanding of that data, what data do I need is then going to really allow me to understand what do I need to tap into, probably using MCP to make that happen.
Yeah.
And, that's the thing that I think is I think it's why you saw that panel light up
Mhm.
because all of a sudden, all those sort of locked doors that I referred to in the past, in a way, are open.
Yeah.
And, if you're a developer, right, that's the goal. And so I think the second thing people need to think about is that this really, I think what it enables, and I don't want to say forces, enables a customer to do is to think strategically about what do I want my sort of AI platform to be. When I say that, I'm differentiating between where is the data or data sources, but where do I want to build my agents? Where do I want to potentially build analytics? And the answer is not going to be the same for every
Right,
customer.
yeah.
What I think this does specifically, though, is it creates choice because what it does is it enables the customer to not necessarily have to look at their platform vendor and go, I got to decide which one is the one ring that
Right,
rules them all.
right.
I'm either making my bet with, my data lake vendor or my
Yeah.
CRM vendor and I think, what this does is say, no, actually you don't have to do that. You can have sort of an independent AI stack that then taps into your cores. And, some vendors or excuse me, some customers are gonna love that. Some customers, really live by a principle of, I'm platform centered, and
Mhm.
that's okay too.
Mhm.
And if they make that choice, MCP still allows them that same flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is super cool about it is you get away from this, kind of the past proprietary lock-in that I got to make my choice and live with it. Well, what happens if you get unhappy with the platform? Now you've taken down your platform and your AI,
Right.
right? Now you've got, I think a lot more flexibility in how you can approach it, which is sort of the magic to it.
So, back to our Bluetooth analogy,
Mhm.
if your kid has an iPhone, you're on Android, you can still play your music through
That's
the
right.
one speaker,
That's exactly right.
and you're good to
Yeah,
go, and
that's
if
right.
you upgrade and get smart and go to an iPhone, and I can send everybody who has a
It's a great way to look at it.
yeah,
I mean, really is, it is this idea of you now have, kind of end-to-end
yeah,
flexibility,
yeah,
right? You can choose whichever phone platform. You want Google, great.
yeah,
You want,
right.
Android, you want iPhone. And then what listening, what earbuds do you like? And you've got all those choices. And I think it's a great way to think about it because that, is what customers want. They want the flexibility to make those choices without being locked in.
Yeah, good. Well, I think that covers it.
Yeah, no,
Think we
I
need to
think
go any
so. I mean,
deeper than that. I would invite people, as I did last time, to reach out to us at keymarketing.com if they wanna start a conversation. We don't need to sell anything. We just wanna have conversations like we're doing here,
yeah,
unstructured conversations.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, look, I it would be, I mean, it's hard on us the speed at which technology is moving.
Yes.
I, I genuinely empathize with customers who are just, seeing a cavalcade of vendors come in and saying, my AI is the best AI.
Mhm.
And I think part of our collective jobs here is to try to help the customer disseminate,
Right,
real from not
right.
and come up with their strategy, not somebody else's strategy that they're pushing to you, and to do that, it's what's my end goals, what data do I need to reach that end goal? How do I get that data? And have a planful approach, preferably on something that, is going to be a win for the organization. And once that happens, you know, that whoever spearheaded that's going to become the most popular person, right? Well, can I do that with this? Can I do that with that? But do it based off that win, not sort of a bet and a hope of, to be able to say we're doing AI.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to get you very far.
Yeah. And it's moving so fast.
Yep.
Everybody's really learning as we go
Yeah.
in a way.
I mean, the idea
So it's
that
not
somebody's
like
going to
that,
walk
but
in and say, well,
I
we've been
do
doing
all-
this for,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, you
Or
haven't.
that you have all the answers. I mean, everybody needs to, come to the table understanding that.
Yep.
It's
That's
a
exactly right.
it's a collaborative thing. It's a relational thing.
Yep.
And as we mentioned last time, pick a problem to solve. Don't start with the largest one. Start with something that is small.
Yep.
And then gain momentum. We see that every day. Meeting it happened. It came up in a meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
Where everybody's having success seems to be they're picking something that's doable and then learning from that. And then once that light bulb comes on, man, it's like a snowball. It just starts going
Right.
and going and going. So
Well, because customers are really being forced to assimilate the idea of this, kind of tech, right? It's just tech
yeah,
to the use case.
Yeah.
And that's hard for a lot of people. And, but oftentimes once they see it up and running in their environment, even if it's different use case than, their department, let's say, to your point, that's the light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And I think finding that win is really the key.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us on the Mostly Unstructured podcast. Thanks, Ed. It's always fun to do this.
Pleasure.
If we said something brilliant, assume that we intended to. So we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.